Research Integrity. I'm your chair today, Jenny van der Steen, and we'll have Natalie Evans as a speaker from Amsterdam UMC, and probably many of you know her from, she's done research integrity research for quite some time, and she will talk about the prepared code. She will start, and then we'll have the referee. The referee for today is Daphne Feinholz, and she is, let's see, and I'm very happy that you could serve as a referee last minute as a replacement. You're a director at interim of the Division of Ethics and Inclusion and chief of the section Bioethics and Ethics or Science Technology at UNESCO. And so Natalie will start with her presentation, then we'll have the referee, and then we'll have time for you as the audience to put your questions in the chat. This meeting is being recorded. So I'll stop sharing my slide, and then the floor is to Natalie.
Thank you. I'll share my slides. Okay. Can you see the slides in presentation mode? Okay, thanks. So today I'm not presenting just my work, I'm presenting the work of the whole Prepared Consortium, so I hope I can do it justice. And we just want to say thank you for letting us hijack the NRIN Happy Hours to do this public consultation of the Prepared Global Code of Conduct for Research during pandemic. So who are Prepared? Well, Prepared is a global consortium. It has partners or advisors on every continent. And the main goal of Prepared is to develop an operational ethics and integrity framework that safeguards key ethical values and supports a rapid and effective research response to crises and improves overall pandemic preparedness. So the main element of this framework is the Global Code of Conduct, but also resilience recommendations and training materials that will be related to the implementation of the code. So we're not just the consortium, we've also established 8 stakeholder platforms. And these platforms have been consulted at every stage of the development of the global code. It's interesting for the NRIN members to know that NRIO, the European Research Integrity Network, is represented by TENK, the Finnish Research Integrity Office, in the governance platform. So it's really useful to have these organizations which already broadly represent a large member base of these stakeholder groups within the consortium, and that's really helped with engagement at every stage. So we've been going for 18 months, and the main output of all of our work so far has been the global code. So what have we been doing? We started with broad scoping reviews on research ethics and integrity challenges. And we did this in 9 languages. So these were tailored reviews using the terms, the language to refer to research ethics and integrity, and indeed the pandemic appropriate for each language. These were supplemented by reviews on ethics and integrity challenges in avian flu, Ebola, and even tsunamis. Well, it says tsunamis, it's actually just one tsunami. So a review related to the Japanese tsunami. And we also, as a consortium, did a very large review of existing ethics guidance related to COVID-19. So we could look at the recommendations contained in those documents and see what kinds of ethics and integrity challenges they reflected. So we took all of these ethics and integrity challenges, summarized them, and brought them to validation workshops with experts from policymakers and advisors, research ethics, governance experts, research integrity, governance experts, and senior researchers from diverse disciplinary backgrounds. So in these validation workshops, we really sought to see if these challenges resonated, to see how they were experienced in practice in the expert settings, and also to see if the experts could add any additional challenges that they experienced in practice. So the consortium weren't just focused solely on the ethics and integrity challenges in research, but also wanted to acknowledge the special burdens that were carried by some groups during COVID-19, and so did reviews on those special burdens related to experiences of healthcare workers, of marginalized groups such as sex workers, people living under the poverty line in India, disabled people, and also people with existing chronic conditions, and also women researchers within the research ecosystem. We also did a review of the human rights challenges related to global crises, and particularly health related human rights challenges, and a review of the regulatory environments in Europe into which the global code would be introduced, to see if the code would be applicable in all regulatory environments, because we are a European funded project. So that particular report was focused on Europe. So all of this background information, all of this evidence was gathered, and then we want to develop a value-based code from all of this. So how do we develop a value-based code? Well, the consortium identified 4 ways to develop a value-based code: drafter-based, code-based, citizen-driven, and risk-based. So drafter-based would be that the small group of code drafters would decide on which values should guide the code. And this has the benefit that the small group of experts were probably very expert in the area and familiar with the challenges, but it has the disadvantage of prioritizing the values of the drafters to the exclusion of others. We could also have taken all of those codes that we gathered and looked at the values that were most frequently guiding in those codes. The benefit of that is it would reflect a broader base of expertise, but we don't know specifically the context that all of those codes were drafted for. So there might be a poor alignment with our specific research ethics and integrity challenges that we've gathered. Could also look to the public and see which values are most important to the public during pandemics, and particularly related to pandemic research, either by asking the public directly through qualitative research, or looking perhaps at social media and which values were expressed there. A disadvantage of this is it would generate a broad range of values, not all of them moral. And also there's a problem with alignment of these values to the specific challenges that were experienced within the research ecosystem, which the public is not expert in. And then the 4th approach is the risk-based approach. So here you take the ethics and integrity challenges experienced, frame them as risks, and then see which moral value is most at stake if that risk comes to pass. And here there is a strong alignment with the challenges identified, but a limitation is that you still have to decide which value is at stake for each risk. So it's still subjective based on the drafter's interpretation. The consortium decided to go with the risk-based approach. So all of that evidence from the scoping reviews, from the code review, and from the experiential evidence from the validation workshops, that was all taken, and 144 risks for research ethics and integrity during the pandemic were identified and linked to the moral value that was most at stake, primarily at stake, because of course, multiple values can be at stake for any particular risk, but the group of analysts within the consortium who did this work tried to link it to the primary moral value that was at risk. And there was a couple of analysts who were doing this independently. Of course, they have to start with some values to link the risks to, and they did start with the general, broad, and globally recognized values of respect, fairness, care, and honesty. These are the values which guide the Trust Code of Conduct for Equitable Research Partnerships, which is very successful and a widely adopted code. So the analysts started with these and also did a gap analysis. So tried to see if any of the risks required a different value from these four, that they couldn't be linked to these four values. The analysts found that these four values were actually indeed sufficient to explain the 144 risks. So then we have our values, and all these risks then need to be linked to recommendations, which were first drafted by our PI of the project, Professor Doris Schroeder. So Professor Schroeder was the first drafted the code by herself for consistency of voice, and then invited a small group of experts from within the consortium and the advisory group to check and refine and add to this first draft of the code. So the comments that were sought, sort of like going in circles out from Doris. So then we go next to the consortium. So all of the consortium and all of the expert global advisors were invited to comment on the second or third draft of the code in May in Amsterdam. Here we had 3 days worth of workshops, discussions, talking about the code, giving input, and then from all of this input, the code was again refined and sent to all 8 engagement platforms. And the engagement platforms were invited to comment on the code then. So these are rounds and rounds of internal comments. We are now on version 8, I think, of the prepared code, but this is the first publicly available version. So this moment here, where you are now, is the first version of the code that we invite the public to start commenting on. So before I go to the code and its articles, I just want to say what the code is and what it is not, to manage your expectations a little bit as well. So the code targets researchers, research ethics committees, and research integrity officers. It doesn't target policymakers, it doesn't target funders and sponsors. So articles that would be appropriate for them are not included in the code. It addresses the real research ethics and integrity risks specific to or greatly exacerbated by a pandemic. So it doesn't duplicate research ethics and integrity recommendations, which are included in ethics code and integrity codes, which are always applicable. It is applicable to all disciplines. So all of this evidence that we've gathered, we haven't limited our evidence gathering to any one discipline. And experts from all disciplines have been invited to comment on the code. However, in a global health crisis, many of the ethics and integrity challenges that were identified are related to health research. So about 50% of the articles in the code are related to health research, and about 50% can be applicable to other types of research. The code has the aim to raise awareness. How widely it will be adopted, and if there will be any enforcement of the code, This depends on how useful the code is, and this also depends on you. So if you can tell us how to make the code better, more applicable to your research, then we can make the code more important. But at the moment, it is for raising awareness. Each article is linked to real-world evidence, and when the code is finished on our website, on the Prepared website, each article will be clickable. You'll be able to see the real-world evidence beneath it, the real risks that are related to it, and training materials for the target groups. You'll see that all the articles are quite general. So they are very generally phrased. They don't specify exactly how the recommendations should be carried out or by whom, so they don't specify operationalization. This is because we want it to be useful for all contexts, and we don't want it to get old very quickly. So they're very general, the recommendations, but they will link to case studies, training materials, where the extra specification might be found. So saying that, limiting hopefully your expectations, I'll start with the vision. And the vision is that pandemic research should be trustworthy and the results accessible. And you might think, well, you've just told us it's specific to pandemics, but this should be true of research at all times. But we think it's so important in a pandemic that we wanted to put it in the vision. And then we have our articles. So each articles are grouped under the moral value that is most at stake if these articles aren't followed. I'm not going to read out all of the articles. You've received the code of conduct beforehand, but just summarizing briefly, the fairness articles are related to fair and timely sharing of scientific data and insights, reducing duplication of efforts and unnecessary burdens on participants, the ethical inclusion of vulnerable people in research, enhanced community engagement, fair benefit sharing, and fair distribution of responsibilities within research teams. The respect articles focus on the importance of timely ethics reviews, respect for community researchers, upholding informed consent, for example, when done remotely or done by treating physicians or in the context of partial or changing information, and avoiding therapeutic misconception. Respectful engagement and language in collaborations and media is also addressed. The care articles emphasize the importance of research not interfering with public health or clinical care activities, care for the safety of researchers and the wider community, care for all research stakeholders who are likely to be under additional burdens at work and at home, and care for participants of non-pandemic research. And the honesty articles, which might be most interesting to the NRIN audience, these include upholding the highest standards of research integrity, honestly taking into account new findings in the fast-changing context of a pandemic, supporting the integrity of the scientific review process and all forms of scientific dissemination, and honesty in communication with the public. So research integrity articles are under honesty because of the strong relation of honesty to truth. There isn't an integrity value separate from honesty because integrity was also thought to be easily confused with moral integrity, that someone with integrity should also be fair, should also respect, and should also care. So the research integrity articles are related to honesty in our code. So I'm not going to take up too much more time because it's a public consultation and we really want to hear your reactions. Want to hear your reactions, your comments, your suggestions. Want to know if you think these recommendations can help in a future pandemic If we've omitted anything vitally important, remember who the target groups are, and remember that these articles are all based on real-world risks that we've uncovered. So none are just draft or suggestions without real-world evidence. None are based on hypothetical scenarios and hypothetical future pandemics.